All right, let's get this review kicked off. I guess AICE, International History Syllabus 94, 89. Gonna change at the end of the year, but for now it's good for the 2026 test. Covers international history from 1870 to 1945, and international pretty much means Europe, Asia, and the Americas, not looking too far elsewhere. Now, the course has 4 chapters. Each chapter has 4 sections. Each chapter pretty much has a main point of focus. Chapter 1, imperialism, motivations for imperialism, impacts of it, all different places where you go, Europe, Asia, United States. Chapter 2, League of Nations, 1920s, post-World War I. How does League of Nations deal or not really deal with international conflict, fallout from the Treaty of Versailles, changing relationships between countries as the 1920s go on. Chapter 3, League of Nations, 1930s. League of Nations, again, dealing or not dealing with different conflicts, disputes, tensions. Also coincides with the rise of extremism in the 30s in places like Europe, also Asia, and towards the tail end deals with the policy of appeasement and ramifications and fallouts of that. Chapter 4 focuses on China, Japan, 1912 to 1945. A good mix of stuff that's kind of from chapter 1, 2, and 3, but then also goes into other stuff regarding Asia, the rise of the CCP in China, the KMT, why and how it happened, the rise of military dictatorship in Japan, and also, of course, the implications of that. These reviews are kind of just yap sessions, right? Looking at what we've done in class throughout the year and making it into digestible kind of tidbits. And then, so if you want it, it can kind of just be yapped to you. Here's pretty much how it's going to work. It's going to be one video for each topic. For the most part, I think. 4 chapters, every chapter is 4 sections. So, like for chapter 1, section 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Pretty sure it's a total of 16. I don't know if I'm going to do this for chapter 4 since for the 2026 exam it is a source-based question. We'll get into exactly how that works in a second. But at minimum, it looks like 12. So that's what it's looking like. And if my math is wrong, obviously my math is worse than my history, so just deal with it, I guess. Each section has an individual question which kind of guides the section, its goals, and the goal is that you're going to be able to answer that question at the end of each section. So I'm going to do my best to try to include as much stuff as possible, but this is just review. This is not end all be all everything. I'll also try to include like visual aids as much as I can, but I'm not good with this stuff, so just bear with me because I've never really done this before. So what does the material look like? It's not that much of a timeline, but it's dense. It's pretty dense. We've looked at a bunch of different presented material in like a plethora of different ways, readings and speeches and quotes and political cartoons and timelines and primary sources, secondary sources, vocab activities, everything we've looked at. Again, the goal is for you to be able to think like a historian. It's historiography, the who, the what, the when, the why, the how. You got to be able to put your thoughts to paper, to words on what happens, why it happens, who happens, when, where, etc. Given that this section is pretty much just like an introduction to what's kind of going on here, I guess I'll touch a little bit on the actual Cambridge assessments themselves. There's 2 distinct papers. Paper 1, paper 2, they don't ask the same questions. Each paper is based on a different chapter covered. So paper 1 covers one singular chapter, and then paper 2 covers the other 3 that aren't obviously covered by paper 1. So if you're taking an exam in 2026, at least in like May 2026, here's what it's going to look like. Paper 1 is covering chapter 4. It's China, Japan, 1912 to 1945. It's a source-based question. I'll tell you a little about that in a second. Paper 2, chapters 1, 2, and 3. And the topics rotate pretty much by year. So last year, it was not like this. The paper 1 question was on chapter 3, and the paper 2 questions were on chapters 1, 2, and 4. Now, each chapter, again, gets its own question. Each question has 2 parts, and kind of trying to run through them as quickly as possible. Paper 1 is source-based. That means it gives you sources to read, look at. It could be a passage, it could be a quote, a speech, it could also be a political cartoon. All questions have 2 parts, A and B. There are different tasks based on different commands, and there are 4 sources. Questions are going to ask you to use specific sources to respond to prompts. Paper 1, question A is going to usually ask you to evaluate 2 sources and compare and contrast them. It can be asked in a couple different ways, but the command is always going to be the same. You are comparing and contrasting the sources it tells you to look at. It could tell you to look at source. They usually refer to them by letter, so it could ask you to look at A and B, or C and D, or A and C, or whatever. But it's going to tell you to look at 2 specific sources, compare and contrast them based on some sort of idea it provides you. Paper 1B is going to ask you to look at all 4 sources and task you with making a judgment on how far the source's point of view that's going to be provided by the question. For paper 1, you are making a total of 2 responses. You had an hour and 15 minutes to do this. Paper 2, on the other hand, is not source based. Paper 2, question A, is going to ask you to explain why or how something occurred. It's an expository response. Expository means that you are explaining. Question B on paper 2 is going to ask you to make a judgment and has several ways of being asked. It could ask you to what extent was something successful. It could give you a point of view and ask you how far you agree. It could ask you how far was X responsible for Y. It could ask you how effective something was. The point is on paper 2 is that you are using your prior knowledge to write a response to the prompt. You do not have any sources, and you have to complete this task 2 different times. There are 3 individual questions. Again, each one asks about one chapter, chapter 1, 2, and 3. Each question has 2 parts, A and B. You only need to answer 2 of the questions. Again, you only need to answer 2 out of the 3. So you are doing this task twice effectively. You're making 4 total responses. Again, you're doing 2A and 2B twice on 2 different chapters. Whichever one you picked are completely up to you. You could pick chapter 3, League of Nations on the 1930s, and imperialism. You could pick League of Nations 1920s and League 1930s. You cannot mix questions from different chapters though. So like you can't answer like the A question from chapter 1 and the B question from chapter 2 and then the A and B question from chapter 3. It needs to be selected from 2 specific chapters. You cannot do that. So for paper 2, you have an hour and 45 minutes to complete. When responding to these questions, the thing you need is evidence, like no matter what. And your evidence can kind of look different from paper to paper. Evidence on paper 1, it comes from text, and your details are always going to show how your evidence responds to the question. Again, so that means your evidence is going to be in the form of quotes, and that details are going to fill in how the evidence responds to the question. Always remember to answer the question that's being asked. Evidence for paper 2 is going to come from specific events or occurrences. So this isn't a source-based paper. That means you are responsible for knowing the content. Also, you have a choice of which chapter you respond to. So it's meant to be that whichever questions you feel that you are most able to accomplish the task for, you will have the choice of filling out. So history is not just a set of facts, all right? It's ideas that can be taught about in a nuanced way. And of course, I say the word nuance because you need nuance to respond to these questions if you're going for gold, as I say. You need to respond to these questions in a nuanced way that provides an understanding of the past. It's different points of view that, maybe you didn't consider, or it gives you insight into why an event happened that maybe others don't consider. With these skills, you will be fine, all right? That's pretty much all I have for the introduction. That's pretty much all this is. It's just an introduction. I'm going to start chapter 1, section 1 in the next video. So, great.